there are some self-destructive behaviors that it's good to be reminded of to help us avoid beating ourselves up and sliding into low self-esteem. And some of these are that feeling I have to be perfect. I have to do it exactly right. I don't make a mistake. I can't make a mistake. It's not always possible to be perfect. Very seldom is it possible to be perfect. And if you're setting such high standards for yourself, you might think that you're a failure when you don't hit the mark that you've made for yourself to be perfect. As we're going through these, just kind of think about things that you've done to yourself in the past at some time or another that really are self-destructive behaviors. They really do bad things to your self-esteem. I have to be strong always. I have to be the one. I can't be down. I can't cry. I have to be the strong one for everyone. That's pretty much impossible. I have to please others before myself. I have to please my parents. I have to please my teachers. The only person you can be sure to please is yourself. I have to hurry up, get more done, and always better. If you make lists, some of you make lists, I know I make lists. Sometimes when you don't fulfill everything on the list, do you feel like, I must have wasted some time. Why didn't I get everything done? I have to take on more responsibilities than anyone else. If any of you have ever had a boss who won't delegate things and they feel like they have to do everything in order for it to be done right, this person may have this attitude that they are the only one who can fulfill duties. So all of these can contribute to really pulling down your self-esteem if you practice them all the time. Here are some great ways to nourish your self-esteem and keep it healthy. Watch the comparisons you make to other people. I've learned to be more careful about not comparing myself to others as I've gotten older. My husband still chastises me sometimes for comparing myself. He says, everyone's an individual. You're not like anyone else. Everyone has their own way of doing things, their own abilities. So it's good to remind yourself of that once in a while. Remember your successes. If you don't have a failure once in a while, you're not trying things out. Remember the times when you were successful. And the last one, I won't cover all of these, but the last one, learn from those failures. If you fail at something, use it as a learning experience. And this is my personal favorite. Seek out positive people who support you. Have you ever been in a situation where you really have to be around negative people? Sometimes we do find ourselves in a job, as a good example, where people you might find, everyone I work with is so down all the time. Everything's negative. They're not happy. Nothing satisfies them. How do you feel in that situation? It really does. It can bring you down. So it's good to try to be around positive people as much as you can. We may talk a little bit more about that in class. Now, switching gears just a bit from the self to the idea of perception, how we see the world, how other people see the world. Perception is your way of understanding the world. It's your way of making sense out of experiences. Perception is an active, not a passive process. And when we're perceiving, say for instance we're walking into this classroom, we're perceiving there's a chair to sit in, we Notice the lights on in the classroom. There are four walls. Our friend is sitting down next to us. Those are all perceptions through the senses. And everything, perceiving that that chair is there for you to sit in just takes a split second. And it seems like a very passive process. It doesn't seem like you're doing anything when you're perceiving that chair. But it's actually a very active process. There are actually 5 stages in the perception process. We're not going to go into great detail on the last 2, memory and recall, but we will talk quite a bit about stimulation, organization, and your interpretation and evaluation of what you perceive. And these take place in this particular order. The first stage in the perception process is stimulation. We receive stimulation through our senses. We might hear, we might smell, we feel, we see. We perceive some form of communication. And remember, as we talked about in the first chapter, that doesn't necessarily have to be hearing words. We might see something, we might smell perfume, we might feel someone's hand on our shoulder. Those are all channels of communication. So this is the first stage in the perception process. Now, there's a couple of things that may happen in the communication process that social scientists have observed people have a tendency to experience. One of these is selective attention. We tend to tune into what interests us. Real simple example of this might be if you're listening to the radio on the way to school. You turn it on, or it comes on when you turn on your car, like mine does. And I may not even be aware the radio's on as I'm pulling out of the garage, getting on the road. I'm thinking about what I'm going to do that day and watching traffic. But when a good tune comes on, a song I like, I tune into it because it interests me. I want to hear it. That's selective attention. Or let's say my husband and I are on a road trip. We're driving through a town, and he notices a used car lot with a couple of really nice old Mustangs. I don't notice it. On the other hand, I might notice a sign that says flea market today. So that's selective attention, and realizing that people tend to do that will help us. So we tune in to what interests us. Another thing that can happen with us in the perception process is that we tend to expose ourselves. This is selective exposure. We tend to expose ourselves to stimulation that will reinforce our own beliefs. Here's an example of that. Fox News, CNN News. Now, I'm pretty sure I've heard Fox News, conservative people politically really like Fox News in general. So, do you think that a person who's more liberal politically would necessarily always listen to Fox News? Probably not. Oh, they may once in a while, but it's not something that they would listen to nearly as much as a person who tends to think that Fox News is going to reinforce their own beliefs. So we do tend to expose ourselves to things that reinforce our own beliefs, the way we understand things and feel about things. So that's the first stage. We're stimulated. The second stage is organization. We've got a lot of things coming at us through our senses, and the only way to manage that and to handle it without flipping out is to have these little templates. And these are little scripts. Remember that word, scripts. These are scripts of how we might go through our day. For instance, you come to school the first day of school. Now, the first day of school, if you've never been to this campus, you probably don't have a script as to where you're going to park, what building you're going to walk into, what classroom you're going to walk to. So the first day of classes, that's all new. You may not have a script other than you know you're coming to the school. But as you get used to coming, the second time you come, you've been here before, you've been in the classroom, you have a little script as to how that'll go. It's a little template, a little script, and you can basically do it without thinking. You can be thinking about what you're going to be doing this weekend because you're just going to park in a specific parking lot. You're going to get out of the car. You're going to walk in the front door of the Bert Walker building. You're going to go to the second floor, that kind of thing. So this helps us deal with all the stimulation that's coming at us constantly, to have scripts and organize what's going on. The third stage of the perception process is interpretation or evaluation. Now remember, all these stages take place in a split second. So in this third stage, this is the stage where we actually assign meaning to what we see or hear or smell or feel. And this is where your individuality really comes into the perception process. Because the way you interpret anything you perceive and the way you evaluate it is based on your own experiences, your own beliefs about the way things should be, your own values and the way you've been enculturated, the way you've been taught, and some other factors can go into it too. But we're going to really focus on your experiences, beliefs, values, that kind of thing. So, excuse me. Someone might have certain experiences or belief system that would lead them to interpret a situation differently than the next person. This is where this is the stage in which we really see our individuality, because every one of us has certainly different life experiences and quite possibly different values, different beliefs, etc., etc. Memory does play a role in perception, specifically how we interpret what's going on, because the way things have played out, the way our experiences have shown us that a certain set of stimuli have played out with certain results will affect how we interpret something going on. Here's one example of that. Let's say a little kid, his dad comes home obviously drunk. Okay. And the little kid can tell when his dad's been drinking, and the kid immediately gets scared and hides in his bedroom because he remembers that last time this happened, his dad yelled at him and wanted to give him a spanking. So that's just one example of how we remember past experiences, and that leads us to have certain interpretations of what's going on now. Recall also plays a bit of a role, and this goes along with memory, really. All I want to say to you about recall, the recall stage, is it's interesting that we tend to recall and remember situations or perceptions that reinforce our own little mental script that we've made for ourselves. On the other hand, we tend to only recall also incidences that are drastically different from our script. Now let's move on to another interesting thing that can happen to people. And this, I can't think of any specific examples from my own experience, but maybe you will be able to. Self-fulfilling prophecy. This is the phenomena that says that if we act on a prediction as though it's true, it will be true. For example, okay, you're invited to a party. Uh, you're thinking, oh man, I won't know anyone there. I'm not going to have a good time. So you've already decided you're not going to have a good time at this party. So chances are you're going to go to the party and you're going to act as if you're not having a good time. Or, another example, you sign up for math class because you need some math credits and you know you haven't been good at math in the past. Chances are pretty great that you're not going to be so great in the math class. You're not going to have a good time in it. You're not going to enjoy it. You may not do well in it. Now, this can also work the other way. If you're going to do a speech in class and you're thinking to yourself, I'm going to knock this one out of the park. I'm going to do I really like my topic. I'm excited about it. Or even if you aren't excited about it, if you still say, I'm going to do well. I'm going to practice. I'm going to do a good job on this. Chances are that'll have an effect on how your speech turns out. That's the self-fulfilling prophecy. Something else that can affect the perceptual process in any one of us is what's called the implicit personality theory. Each of us tends to have a little script. Here we go with scripts again. Little script about what qualities go with other qualities, what characteristics go with other characteristics. If we see someone who's really friendly and seems to be very nice and smiley, we might also think, oh, they must be a really smart, kind, honest person. This is called the halo effect. Now, the fact that they smile and greet you and say hello and are friendly to you, does that necessarily mean that they're also honest and treat their mother nicely? No. But we tend to use the halo effect. And it's good to be aware of this because people can use this to their benefit. The flip side of this is what we call the reverse halo effect. And these are both two opposite ends of the implicit personality theory spectrum. At one end, you've got the halo effect. You see someone with good qualities and or one good quality, and you right away you assign all these other good qualities to them. And we're not sure they are necessarily true based on that one good quality. At the other end of the implicit personality theory is the reverse halo effect. And what do you think this is? Well, this is the fact that, let's say the first day of class, you see a student come in the door. He's dragging his feet. He's looking down at the floor. He's got really dirty clothes on, and his hair is greasy and stringy. He just plops down in a chair. He doesn't say hello to anyone. Now, some of the words that some of us might assign to this person, other than, he's dirty. I mean, we can see he's dirty. We might also not trust him. We might assume that he isn't smart. Are those two things necessarily true? No. So this is good to keep in mind. Let's talk about attribution for a minute. Attribution is the explanation of why a person is or reacts in a certain way. Attribution is the reasons or motivations we give for a person's behavior. And we tend to judge or interpret a person's actions, interpret and evaluate a person's actions by whether we think the person was in control of the situation or they were not in control of the situation. For instance, someone comes to late work, work late, comes to work late. If they say, oh, the railroad tracks, this train took 15 minutes, we might say, oh, tough break, oh well. But if someone says, oh man, I just couldn't get out of bed this morning, we have a little different evaluation of that based on whether they were in control or not. Interesting, huh? Here are a couple more terms that we can look at that might affect the perception process. So one is self-serving bias. If you take credit for everything that's going right due to your own personality, your own perseverance, your own qualities, you take credit for what's going right. And on the other hand, if something goes wrong, well, it was outside of your control. For instance, you do really well on a test. Oh, yeah, I studied hard. I'm just smart in that subject. On the other hand, if you fail the test and you say, the teacher didn't cover those things, or in class, or, well, I had too much other homework in my other classes. They were giving me too much. Anything that's outside of ourselves. If something goes wrong, oh, it's not our fault. That's self-serving bias. Over-attribution. Over-attribution is really assigning everything that a person does based on one quality. For instance, well, he's a nervous person, so he overeats. Everything he does is based on the fact that he's just a very nervous person. Or she's irresponsible because she's never had to work for a living. So everything she does, she spends a lot of money, she is irresponsible. It's all due to the fact she's never had to work for a living. These may be true. Some of these things may be true. Facts may be true. But we have to realize that sometimes we can over-attribute. Not necessarily everything that a person does and isn't necessarily due to one fact about them. And this is rather akin to stereotyping, really. Over-attribution. Some tips on increasing your accuracy in your perceptions. Recognize your own bias in perception. If you tend to always judge people who live in the dorm a certain way, well, everyone who lives in the dorm is getting a free ride. This is just an assumption that someone might make. So they're just not going to do well in school. Whatever. So that may be just a bias, and it doesn't mean that it's true in every situation. So realizing that you may have biases will help you be more accurate in your perceptions. I won't speak about every one of these, but seek validation. Consider any possible differences in enculturation. Seek confirmation from the person themselves, and this would really be, did you mean what I thought you meant? Because they may be able to say, well, no, not exactly. Oh, okay. So these are just some tips how to increase accuracy in your perceptions. You might want to ask questions of the source themselves. Let's talk about impression formation. Impression formation is the process of perceiving, interpreting, and evaluating another person. That's the way we're talking about it in this chapter. And this is impression formation is something that we do, the way that we want to present to the world, and it also includes the way others form impressions for us. Impression management is also known as self-presentation or image management. We've all done it at one time or another. Everyone develops a way that they feel comfortable in presenting themselves when they want to be liked, when they want to be believed, when you want to be excused from a failure, when you want to get help, when you want to hide your faults, when you want people to follow you, you want to be the leader, or you want to confirm your self-image. We develop strategies for these as we need them, and different people might have different strategies for themselves.